Welcome, friends. Please silence your phones. Today's presentation is on relative and absolute knowledge. Next Sunday's presentation will be on those who know. United Lodge of Theosophist students in the Washington, D.C. area meet here at 4865A Cordell Avenue, Bethesda, Maryland, at 11 a.m. on Sundays. And at 12:30 p.m., first and third Sundays, we have roundtable discussions on a selected topic. The current topic is the Bhagavad Gita and related notes. All work of this lodge is aimed at passing on, in their purity, teachings of the ancient message from the Masters of Wisdom that H.P. Blavatsky named Theosophy. Each of us has the opportunity, in our own way, to assimilate this powerful and common sense message, thus making it a living power in our lives, in our every thought and action. Please help by your attendance, time and money donations to keep alive these uplifting teachings that are necessary for humanity's future. We are guided by the ULT declaration on the back of our program. So we work independently and with each other to achieve a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. We hold that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching. We have neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers. The sole bond between associates is the furtherance of unity. All who are engaged in the true service of humanity are regarded as Theosophists, and we welcome to our association all who are in accord with the purposes of our declaration, and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading is from the Dhammapada. Turning over here to page 89, chapter 26, the Brahmana. O Brahmana, be energetic, dam the stream, cut away desires. When you understand how things get disintegrated, you will also realize the uncreate, O Brahmana. When a Brahmana reaches the other shore by meditation and insight, he attains knowledge and is free of all fetters. Him I call a Brahmana, for whom there is neither this nor the further shore. Fearless and free, he is beyond both. Him I call a Brahmana, who is meditative, stainless, settled, whose duty is done and depravities gone, who has attained the highest end. The sun shines by day, the moon lights up the night. The warrior, Kshatriya, is resplendent in his armor. The Brahmana in his meditation. But the Buddha shines day and night, radiating in his glory. Because he has driven away sin, he is called a Brahmana. Because he lives in serenity, he is called a Samana. Because he has put away worldliness, he is called a pabjanta. Him I call a brahmana, who offends not by body, speech, or mind, who is controlled in these three things. Even as a brahmana worships the sacrificial fire, so should one reverence him who understands the law of the fully enlightened one. Him I call a brahmana, who has destroyed all fetters and has nothing to fear, who is unshackled and emancipated. Him I call a brahmana, who has cut the straps of hatred and the thong of craving and the rope of heresies and its branches of latent tendencies, who has burst the bar of ignorance and has awakened. Him I call a brahmana, who, though innocent of all offense, patiently bears reproach, ill treatment, and confinement. Patience is his force, his own strength, his army. Him I call a brahmana, who is free from anger, devoted to duties, practices divine virtues, who is without cravings and control, who wears his last body. Him I call a brahmana, from whom desires drop like water from a lotus leaf or mustard seed on the point of an awl. Him I call a brahmana, who, ever here, knows the end of his suffering, who has laid aside his burden and is detached. And now for our talk on relative and absolute knowledge.
Good morning and welcome, friends. Why should we talk about relative and absolute knowledge? Because if we want to understand the secret doctrine and benefit as to what is in it and be able to apply it, then we need to know that these two, relative and absolute knowledge, is discussed in it side by side. And not only that, one is real, the other one is transitory. So absolute knowledge is always there, but the relative knowledge changes as nations develop in their capacity to use their mind. So we will start today's talk then with a quotation from the Secret Doctrine. This you can find on page 326. Outside of initiation, the ideals of contemporary religious thought must always have their wings clipped and remain unable to soar higher. For idealistic as well as realistic thinkers, and even free thinkers, are but the outcome and the natural product of their respective environments and periods. The ideals of both are only the necessary results of their temperaments and the outcome of that phase of intellectual progress to which a nation in its collectivity has attained. Hence, as already remarked, the highest flights of modern, which is the Western metaphysics, have fallen far short of the truth. Now, if we reflect on the statement in there, we will come and ask ourselves these questions. Are there two types of psychomental evolution? What is the difference between the thinker who is the outcome and the natural product of his environment and period, and the knower of truth, quotation, initiated into perceptive mysteries referred to in the text and above quotation we just mentioned. Are there two fundamental classes of knowledge? What's the difference between that which exists and is discovered and that which the evolving intelligence of man invents in ever renewed attempt, which implies abandonment of that which was previously found and accepted? Otherwise, outside such initiation, for every thinker there will be a thus far shalt thou go and no farther, mapped out by his intellectual capacity as clearly and as unmistakably as there is for the progress of any nation or race in its cycle by the law of karma. A secret doctrine. So, from this statement, then, are we to infer that every intellectual capacity is also a karmic limitation? And if the philosophers are limited and metaphysics fall far short of the truth, what fate then does the poor seeker of knowledge and wisdom have a chance? What about those of us who are constantly trying to pass from the dungeon of ignorance into the light of knowledge? What chance do we have? So, if we meditate on these statements, we will actually understand karma better, which a lot of people know the word, but they really don't understand what it is. Karma is nature's law. Everyone is under a sway, all the way up to Brahma, that we just were reading from the Dhammapada. So, and if the truth can only be obtained through initiation, how do we then get to be initiated is the other question. Or should that come into our thought at all? When we read the secret doctrine, it brings possibilities to the mind of the reader. First, let us look at the mind. We are the Aryan fifth root, and we, today's civilization, is the fifth sub. So we have to keep that in mind. And if we correlate this to the principles that we always discuss in Theosophy, and there are 7 of them, the mind, which is related to obtaining knowledge, relative knowledge at least, is the 5th principle in our constitution. So we're the 5th sub, the 5th principle then. I'm sorry, I can't write. 5th principle is the mind. So this era then is the era of the mind. The mind then is full of intellectual achievements. All these that we see around us today are definitely intellectual achievements. So our knowledge grows from day to day. It's very obvious because scientific facts as presented by materialistic science comes to the forefront. We drop things that we believed in previously. We accept new facts as they come forth. But this is also the age of materialism. We, as the 5th root race, it is written in the secret doctrine, should have moved away from such enmeshing into material substance. So we are enmeshed in material. As a race development, all these phases that we go through is necessary for humanity's development, but we're supposed to go through it, not get enmeshed into it. So when we look around, we realize that materialism plays a tremendous power in our lives. We see that this power of the mind and the productivity of matter is very amazing, because if you scrutinize it, we have all kinds of branches of science, different schools of philosophy, artistic expression, all kinds of religious sects, and so we know that this is going on in our materialistic society. So, intellectual materialism is the source of our economic and industrial materialism. Our materialistic politics, then, are rooted in our materialistic philosophy. Materialistic sociology arises from materialistic religions. So, the individuals today who believe themselves as beings of matter, the secret doctrine says, are the outcome and the natural product of their environment and period. So going through this cycle is a natural process. We're going to do it, but we need to grow out of it and move to the fifth principle, expressing itself as the higher mind, the altruistic mind, the mind that attunes itself to humanity as one family. So we also look around, and that materialistic mental materialism has brought about experts in all fields. Just look at the medical field. You have to go to a specialist for every little detail. There is no generalist that can put all this information together and understand what the root of the disease is. Each one that you go to looks at you from his own limited perspective and then gives you his analysis and leaves you open, because you still are not anywhere as to why you have the disease. And you have to go to another specialist and another specialist, and by that time we will find out perhaps that it's too late to put all that information together to be of any benefit to ourselves. So when we look at them, this is a quotation again. The ideals of both are only the necessary results of their temperaments and the outcome of the phase of intellectual progress to which a nation in its collectivity has attained. So this is where we are as a nation. But then the student of this philosophy asks, okay, is there always going to be this ever expanding, ever deepening divisions of matter where knowledge continuously becomes ignorance and is kind of put aside, thrown away, and new things coming in? The secret doctrine actually opens new vistas for the thoughtful student. Therein we find more than a hint of the existence of the immemorial or immortal knowledge, ancient and unchanging, constant and consistent. This broad but very vital hint is like an illumination that must have come to Galileo when the light dawned on him that the earth was not at the center of the universe, and that it had a diurnal rotation about the sun. So if we pursue this thinking through, we come to page 611 in the Secret Doctrine, which says, the exact extent, depth, breadth, and length of the mysteries of nature are to be found only in Eastern esoteric sciences. So vast and so profound are these that hardly a very few of the highest initiates those whose very existence is known but to a small number of other adepts are capable of assimilating the knowledge. But then she says, yet it is all there. It is all there. That knowledge then is to be found only in Eastern esoteric sciences. How can we find it? How can we obtain it? So we read on, and then this other statement comes about. Mysterious help is given to rare individuals in unraveling its arcana. We're talking about science here. So we're uplifted a little bit again. It's all there. Help is given to individuals who are in the benefit of humanity. And one by one, we're told facts and processes in nature's workshops are permitted to find their way into exact sciences. So this changing of knowledge is definitely relative, because it is changing, but the real facts underlying certain nature's truths are allowed to come into exact sciences. And mysterious help is given to rare individuals. Then she tells us this comes at the close of great cycles in connection with racial development. So then, are we doomed? What year is she talking about here? She came for the 19th century, normally at the last quarter, 1875, to they come at that 25-year cycle, initiate the process of enlightening humanity, live whatever it is that they intend to live for us to continue that development with. It was the first time that this movement came to the West, to the United States, because this is a free thinking country at that time. That was what was being put forward. Plus, psychism was taking place, and that was a window opening that they could use to bring this knowledge forward. So we're talking about 1875 and thereafter. Is this relevant to today? What other cycle have we had? Well, we have had 1975. This is 2018. So what was relevant then is relevant today, because unfortunately for us, humanity learns its lessons very slowly. We are not fast learners. We're still enmeshed in materialism. Our thinking is still affected by dogma, because regardless of what we say that we don't believe or believe, we are raised in that system of dogmatic thought. Most of the societal norm is that people believe in external forces coming to help them, when we should become self-reliant and turn inward, because how are we going to be initiated into intuitive mysteries? It's not an external process, it's an internal process. And we read about the Brahmana, where his inner life is open to him. So this is the purpose of the book. Once we start reading it, yes, we're going to get relative knowledge as well as absolute knowledge, and we'll come to it in a few seconds as to what they are. And that is what actually opens the path for the student who is faithful and stays with the study for the duration, whatever that is, on earth, because that understanding is necessary to the obtainment of truth. Nowhere is it written, follow me or do as I say. It is written, study, work, apply, and then only will you know the truth. as a result of Cartesian proposition in Western philosophy, relativity of knowledge became a subject of debate. What's the Cartesian proposition? We're talking about Descartes. He proposing that materialistic mechanical thinking of scientific facts in nature. But before him, the Greeks were discussing this, and so were the Asiatics. Then we found Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher, who puts noumenon into modern currency. And he expounded the old doctrine and called it thing in itself. But it was in a limited sense because he was circumscribed by his environment and period, just as we read before, and he could go so much and no further. So Kant's world of noumena and Plato's world of ideas have much in common. But Plato, like Pythagoras, and unlike Kant, was initiated into perceptive mysteries, so we are informed. Pythagoras also taught absoluteness of knowledge as a fundamental proposition. He put forward the fact of a permanent principle of unity beneath and behind the changing forms of phenomena of the universe. So we have noumenon and phenomena of our physical universe. So to this, the world of archetypal unity, belong ideas of Plato and things in themselves of Kant. In the Pythagorean philosophy, absolute knowledge may be described as belonging to the unity underlying all forms, in the Platonic as being composed of the idea of knowledge, and in the Kantian it can be regarded as the knowledge of things in themselves. So these concepts should not be taken to mean that acceptance or belief in absoluteness of knowledge destroys the acceptance of belief in relative knowledge, because they exist in the secret doctrine and in reality side by side. They're not separate from one another. So the secret doctrine maintains all through its writings that these two are not incompatible, that they exist simultaneously. So when we become aware that these two are stated and contrasted all through the secret doctrine, then we need to pay attention to it as to from which perspective we're reading it. Is it the noumenon, which is referring to the unity behind everything, or the idea of Plato, or Kant's things in themselves, or are we referring to phenomena, which is the relative knowledge we have been talking about, which changes with time as we go along, according to what human mind is discovering for that period. The previous knowledge is thrown out and the new stuff comes in. If you go to the scientific literature, you will find this to be very true, that from century to century, all our knowledge has changed tremendously. Especially after with Einstein, when he came up with his relativity theory, we took a different leap. He used to put himself with a light ray and used to run with it to focalize it in his mind as to what the light was doing, and that's how he came up with that theory. So he used his imagination quite a bit. So our modern science and the Western philosophy concerns themselves just with phenomena of the world And we need to be aware of that too. So one of the services rendered by the secret doctrine to modern thought is the reintroduction of the concept of world of archetypes, implying absoluteness of knowledge in that the sphere of idea as an eternally existing reality laid up in the mind of God or deity, of which the knowledge by the senses and the knowledge of feelings, which is the knowledge of mind, are reflections and bear resemblance to the reality, but which can be corrupted and eroded by the intellectual mind of humanity as developed up to this point. So, to fully grasp the proposition of the secret doctrine that the exact extent, depth, breadth, and length of the mysteries of nature are there, it is necessary for us to see what term implies in modern culture. And she discusses this in very wide categories that you can all find it in the secret doctrine, because there is no time to go into it in all of its fullness. However, reference to two categories of knowledge is made: recognition and assimilation of impression, and the result of intellectual comparison. We encounter these difficulties. Western philosophy is more speculative than practical, and the scientific expert prefers mere ideas to the real and deals with that which is becoming, considers it highly superstitious to take into account the world which is, and regards the individual who thinks or talks about it as what? Superstitious. So, eternal self-consciousness, which knows the whole, what we know in part, if proposed to this era, we would be considered lunatics probably. So, if we know a psychiatrist and we tell him that human and God experiences are intimately related because one is absolute, the other one is relative, what would he say? What would he tell us? Would he consider us sane? Yeah, we need to think about these things. So, the modern philosopher then admits that our knowledge of things is conditioned by our perceptive faculties, and regards as quite unphilosophical one who assumes that such as a rose, as he sees it, is identical with the rose in itself of Kant, and maybe also for others. And the scientist then tells us, well, we can tell you what the rose is chemically, we can tell you how it grows, what class it belongs to, we can tell you what bugs like to eat it, what pesticides kills it. And my telescope and my microscope, my test tube, my exquisite balance has never shown any noumenon. Everything is phenomenal because it's on the physical plane. This is what the scientific world does. Looks at the world from the physical standpoint. What you see, what you can touch is reality. But where is the noumenon? He's asking. I'm using all these tools. I don't know what you're talking about when you talk about noumena, because I have never seen it. I have never experienced it. But let us see what the secret doctrine says to it. It is stated, science cannot, owing to the very nature of things, unveil the mystery of the universe around us. Science can, it is true, collect, classify, and generalize upon phenomena, but the occultists, arguing from admitted metaphysical data declares that the daring explorer who would probe the inmost secrets of nature must transcend the narrow limitations of sense and transfer his consciousness into the region of noumena and the sphere of primal causes. To this effect, we are told, he must develop faculties which are absolutely dormant, save in a few and exceptional cases, in the constitution of the offshoots of our fifth root race in both Europe and America. He can in no other conceivable manner collect the facts on which to base his speculations. And then we're asked the question, is this not apparent on the principles of inductive logic and metaphysics alike? Secret Doctrine, page 477. We are advised to transfer our consciousness into the region of noumena and the sphere of primal causes. Therefore, it is but natural to infer that in that region lie embedded the Eastern esoteric sciences that we discussed earlier, where she told us it's all there, in which only are to be found the exact extent, depth, breadth, and length of the mysteries of nature. The world of noumena, of the things in themselves, or of archetypes, or of equity, Pythagorean, or ideas of Plato, need not be regarded as a mere background to be posited in thought and language for the purposes of understanding and discussion of philosophical propositions. It is a reality, and a substantial reality at that. This sphere of noumena is not a metaphysical concept, it is a scientific fact. Those who regard it as the first can find out the second, as their ancient predecessors did. How? Well, we were told the philosophers themselves had to be initiated into perceptive mysteries, and thus they contacted the knowledge which is immortal, imperishable, eternal, and constant. So the contrast of the absolute and relative knowledge in the secret doctrine posits this proposition to us. The modern scientist rejects the first and accepts the second. The ancient scientists accepted the eternal, constant, and consistent knowledge, whose teachings he obtained through the mysteries of initiation. For him all else was illusion, but of that illusion, which is the phenomena, he took note and did not deny its existence. So, what is this referred to in the secret doctrine as? Dzyu. The one real magical knowledge is referred to as Dzyu, or occult wisdom, which, dealing with eternal truths and primal causes, becomes almost omnipotent when applied in the right direction. But its antithesis, Dzyu-mi, this word, Dzyu-mi, that which deals with illusions and false appearances only as in our exoteric modern sciences. In this case, then, what is Dzyu referring to? It is the collective wisdom of the Dhyani Buddhas. This knowledge here comes from the collective intelligence of the Dhyani Buddhas. And if we are familiar with the secret doctrine passages where humanity's progression from ethereal to material existence comes, then we know that the Dhyanis referred to in the secret doctrine, there is 7 primary groups as well as 7 primary races put on earth at the beginning of every cycle, and the great cycle is not a very short period of time as we have all been educated to believe in, but it is 311 trillion 40 billion years we're talking about for this Manvantara, the age that we have this development in. And the 7 Dhyanis are the archangels of the Christian religion. So, and Amshashpans in the Zoroastrian religion, they are there in every religion. They are there, however corrupted that religion might be. Its base is definitely from the secret doctrine of the ages. So different words perhaps are used because this knowledge comes to different areas of the earth, to different nations at different times, and according to the culture, the understanding of the nation it is given to, it is given in that form so that the population or however or the culture can understand it. So the Dhyanis then are the spiritual progenitors of humanity. They're not gods, simply powers. Dhyani Buddhas, in other words, the 7 Dhyanis collective intelligence is Dzyu referred to in the secret doctrine, and it is the absolute knowledge which is behind the phenomena. It actually gives rise to the phenomena, but the phenomena is changing according to our intellectual capacity, and that becomes Dzyu-mi because it is phenomenal. So here it is, the collective wisdom is, how do you spell that? D, is that, this is their collective wisdom. And when we add the Dzyu-mi, then it becomes a phenomenal, which is its reflection. But as stated, it becomes corrupted and changed according to the intellectual capacity of humanity at that period of time. And this philosophy has been given as truth, and we are told that it is written in these books because they wanted it recorded for the first time so that we would not be left at the mercy of charlatans and people who come forward trying to fool humanity continuously that this is the real, this is the false. Here we can read it, make a decision for ourselves as to what truth is, and if we can live up to obtaining it for ourselves, because this is collective humanity we are talking about. This knowledge does not come very easily. It requires tremendous effort and persistence in obtaining it. And now we'll open it for questions. Yeah?
Why does it require all this persistence and all this effort?
Well, obtaining this knowledge?
Right. I mean, are we not oriented in this way, or what?
Well, how have we been oriented for the last 2,000 years? In the first few centuries of this 2,000-year era that we have been living in, where was this knowledge? The Gnostic fathers of the church knew it. The Gnostic fathers. Because Gnostics is occult. So, in all ages, we are told there are those who are ready to be initiated into the perceptive mysteries. Can it be given to all? What good would it do if you're not ready to understand it? So, at that time, they had enactments of truth in their temples. One in Alexandria could hold 30,000 people in it, the temple itself. And during those enactments, the ones that were ready for initiation were initiated in the sanctuary, but the general population had no idea as to what was going on. It was only those who were sworn to secrecy and who were ready by their preparation to be initiated, got initiated. So has this process changed is what we really need to ask. So to answer your question, okay, in the first 2-3 centuries, by the way, no one should be offended by what the secret doctrine says, because it is not a personal philosophy that's being put forward, but an impersonal philosophy. This philosophy is impersonal. And those who get offended personalize it to themselves. This is an impersonal philosophy. It is for all of humanity. Having said that, Jesus Christ does not belong to our historical era. There's absolutely no evidence of his coming. No writer ever mentions him. And the secret doctrine says there was a one. Joshua Pandira was his name. He came 100 to 150 years prior to the historic era. It is not the one made up by dogmatic church fathers and sold to humanity as the truth. Having said that, we need to ask ourselves what is written in the Gospels. There are interpretations of passages from the Gospels that HPB gives in the Secret Doctrine, and when read as to what it was implied underneath it, it makes a lot of sense. But read on the surface, as is written, it makes absolutely no sense. It makes humanity murderers, fratricide is in it, killing animals are in it. In other words, it is not a humane appearance of humanity at all. So this is what we're talking about, corruption. If the root is one and they all come from this wisdom of the ages, then how does that get corrupted? We need to ask who wrote the Gospels, what was their purpose, because they're not all the same. Certain facts are different. Now even the historians are saying that there were 3 or more writers for each Gospel. So humanity needs to ask these questions to themselves. Not accept it because someone else is saying, but ask the question and go do your own research and see if that is the truth for yourself. This was on PBS. They had all these historians being interviewed, and this is what they said themselves. So you can all find those facts for yourself. So having said that, the Gnostic knowledge is given to those who are initiated into the perceptive mysteries. It is not given to the outside world, especially during those earlier centuries, because it was kept as a secret in the sanctuary. The Hierophant was the one who determined who was ready to give it to, and they were all initiated during that process that was enacted. There was one in Ulysses as well, and when you read Apollonius of Tyana's life, he came in the 1st century AD. You can see that he traveled all over and gave knowledge to these centers that were the initiation centers at that time. So it's internal to each human being, but when the environment enables you to express it is one thing, but when the environment suppresses it and continuously burns you on the cross, would you say it? Would you say the truth? The ones that had the courage to stand up to the church said it. What happened to them? Did they survive it? No. So this is the 21st century. This is the Aquarian age. We can express our thought, so we think clearly. Some countries obviously don't appreciate this free speech, but supposedly we can in the West. So I'll finish it. So what is being discussed here is that you were not free for a very, very long time to say what the truth was. You could not study mathematics, you could not study philosophy, you could not read and write. It was forbidden by the church. Most of the stuff was in Latin and Greek. Most people did not speak it or write it, so they didn't know it. So you accepted what the church told you. And that became engraved in us. That dogmatic thing became engraved. Now the truth is given out. Who's interested in it? What happened to our minds? Have they been closed? Is it easy to open it out again and perceive these realities within yourself? Is the question needs to be asked. Because if the perceptive mysteries existed then it stands to reason that they exist today. Who is initiated into them is another question we can ask ourselves. How is it done? Where is it done? Who knows? Those who know don't say, and those who don't know blubber about it because they don't know the truth. You had a question?
You mentioned Alexandria. Wasn't there a famous female philosopher there?
Hypatia? Yes, there was. 4th century AD. She was unfortunately murdered by Cyril's mob. I don't have good things to say about the church. I'm sorry. I can only make the statement as fact. It's not that the students are against any church or any religion whatsoever, but the facts are facts, and we have to make the statement accordingly. Yeah, Hypatia was the last female philosopher, but nevertheless, last philosopher that killed all the mysteries on the surface of the earth, and then all of the hierophants retired further and further into Arabia, and as you know, then the light passed into Arabia. How many? 6th century AD? Yeah. So it goes to different places where the soil can carry it. If the soil in Europe could not carry it because we went into the Dark Ages because of the church, then it had to find its expression somewhere else. And so Muhammad is the resultant of that. In the ocean, it is stated that he was a minor intermediary, but nevertheless, he found out the truth for himself. That's the other thing. Once one finds out the truth, you can't really give it to another. The other has to find that truth within themselves also. So all these great beings, the heroes, the prophets, they all existed in their time, and they tried to guide the people, but guidance and dogma is not the same. Guidance allows free thinking, allows the individual to accept responsibility for their thinking and action. But in the West, this even was taken away from humanity in general, because we became dependent on something outside of ourselves which does not exist. There are powers of nature, and that comes about under karma, which is the law, nature's law. And so that developmental stages go forward from age to age according to the general program. But here's the other thing we have to think about. This is supposed to be a circle. I think that it is. We have now reached the midpoint. We are the 5th root race, and we are circling towards a spirituality. This side is immersion into substance. We have been immersed. Our physical body is perfected. If it is not perfect and it doesn't function well, it's because we're not doing it right. It's not that it hasn't been done. So now we're turning towards spirituality. On page 200 of the Secret Doctrine, there's a chart, a map, diagram, whatever you want to call it. I think it's a diagram. It's just called a diagram that shows this development in stages and shows all of the route as to how that comes about. Now, when we are immersing, we start ethereal, as we said at the top, and as we come down, we materialize. It's just a progression that we have to go through because there is no way we can affect the substance around us and upraise it as we are going through it, because we are the ones that are upraising it. So here, unfortunately, nature does not push anymore. Up to this point, we're all moved forward. It finds a higher expression of itself, and it moves everything forward, including humanity. But at this point, no more. Why? Because at this point, we have become responsible, supposedly we have become responsible, self-conscious individuals who can use discrimination and knowledge in making decisions, and certainly hope we make the right decisions, because if we do not, we won't make any progress. So progress at this point is dependent on self-induced and self-devised effort. Thank you. No more are we going to push. And somebody asked a question at the symposium, and the question was, I don't want to do the work, I'm lazy. I can't read the Secret Doctrine and try to figure out what it is all about and apply it to my life. And the speaker said, yeah, you have that choice. You can be lazy. In fact, the first statement at the beginning of the book says, if you're obtuse, which means lazy, this book is not for you, because you have to put effort into it. You have to study it. You have to learn it. You have to apply it. And the speaker was a male. He said, yeah, sure, that's your option. You can do it. And then she says, well, what happens to me? Well, he said, what do you think nature does with you? Recycles you. So in this mantra, you don't want to work, you're not going up to spirituality, what do you think is going to happen to you? You're not a material substance. The body is material, right? The body, physical body, is made up of substance that we develop as we go along. Yeah, sure, but I'm not the body, am I? My body drops off. What's left? Astral body, that drops off too. Karmic nature, that also drops. Passions and desires, which is a principle in philosophy, that drops too. What is left? Here's the higher triad. This is the entity. Atma, the spirit, buddhi, wisdom or discernment, and manas, mind. Mind and brain, as we know, is not the same thing. The soul uses the manas or the mind as a tool to obtain information from the world. Manas in return uses the physical brain. It's the link between the upper and the higher. And this is how it is depicted in this literature. This is the higher triad. This is the part that goes from life to life. It's the entity that retains that individuality. But this part, what is this part? The four we just talked about, physical body, astral body, your karmic nature, and your passions and desires, all drop off here on earth. And this entity then, in its subtle vehicle, goes for a rest period. That's where the heaven comes from, but it's not realistic, because we don't go there to stay there forever. We go there to assimilate what we have learned, and hopefully in the next life we will come out as a higher individuality, more attuned to humanity's pain and more willing to work for it. And if you have no other
so
questions.
we need this philosophy whether we know it or not.
Okay, the West definitely needs it more than any other, because karma and reincarnation, if you don't put that in there, how is perfection going to be reached? Because that is the whole process humanity goes through, cycle after cycle, until it reaches emancipation. Emancipation from that material existence, that it recognizes Atma Buddhi Manas as the real self, and not this self, the personality we talked about, with its passions, personality, with its passions and desires and all that, without which we can't exist on earth either, because it's the link here. Manas is the link, and it links the higher to the lower, so that soul can experience all the sense perceptions and obtain information and increase its knowledge. There is a purpose to our life, but we just don't know what it is at this stage of development. We should have learned it by now. So thank you for coming, and next week is Those Who Know. We will look forward to seeing you then.